Hey guys, welcome to Thriving in Love podcast, the podcast that challenges the status quo so we could thrive as our authentic selves. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest, Tony. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you so much, Sana. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Yeah, happy to be on the podcast. I love your content.
Yeah, likewise. Please tell the audience what you're doing these days and how I found you on TikTok. You're blowing up. So I'm so excited for the audience to know what you're up to.
Yeah, so the broad stroke of my story is that I'm an entrepreneur, a creative as well. And in January, my wife came home and asked for a divorce. Sideswiped me. It was the very
The dagger to the
similar.
heart.
Oh, the dag. I mean, yeah, it was. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. It was the I'm
Ooh,
unhappy. I'm done. I want a divorce, and I was just like, what? No,
wow. Yeah.
And I love her. So I'm like, look, if you're not happy with me, I just want you to be happy, so go,
Yeah.
right? It was the most pain that I've ever gone through, right? But the truth is that event was really the beginning of all of my wounds being exposed, right? Because I took accountability, and
Yeah.
I dove into the work, and I looked at this as an opportunity to grow. I looked at this as an opportunity to understand myself in a more intimate way, right? Because I thought that I was doing
Yeah.
everything right, right? Like I was
You've been on
doing
the
what I
personal
was.
development journey for years,
I
right?
have been. I have been. I've
Yeah.
been sober for a long time, so you know,
Yeah.
I understand just the principles of spirituality and, taking
Right.
accountability and all that stuff, and it's like, and I felt that I was in a good place, right?
Yeah.
But looking back, right now I can see, wow, like I wasn't in a healthy place there. I wasn't in a healthy place there. It's like I wasn't speaking my truth. I had abandoned myself, right? And then
Yes.
it starts to all make sense, right? But once again, it's like it gave me the opportunity to just dive in, right? And it's like I felt like this is the universe saying, are you going to level up here? Are you going to
Yeah.
take the route of like victimhood and go down that path, and continue that vicious cycle of living unconsciously and living with unawareness? Are you going to do that? Or are you going to level up?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know
It's like
what?
a opportunity. It's the split
Yeah.
that I think so many are going through during
Yeah.
these rock bottom moments. But when it first happened, was your initial reaction, oh, let me get curious? Or was there a period where you did fall into victimhood, or where you knew what to do right away?
No, I mean, in all transparency, it took me about 90 days to land.
Yeah,
It threw my nervous system into a complete shock, right? I couldn't eat,
of
I couldn't sleep. I
course.
lost 20 pounds in like a week, right?
Wow.
Um, like I was crying all day. I was so lost, right? I was so
Wow.
lost because like, how did this happen, right? Like, how did I let it get to this point?
Mm,
How did I not know that she was suffering, right? Like, how did I not
yeah.
know, right? So it took me a long time, right, to really
Get
like
back to stable
feel
ground.
myself. Yeah, to
Mm,
feel myself, right? And once I started to get there, I was like, okay, I can start to like do the work, right? And in that
yeah.
first 90 days I was doing the work. I started to read books. Like that was the
Mm,
first thing I did,
wow.
and started to do journaling, got back into prayer and meditation because my practice before, right? I would pray and I would
Mhm.
meditate every day, right? But it was such a
Right.
monotonous process of my life that
Mhm.
literally when I was praying, I was just speaking words. And when I was meditating, I was just sitting there. Right.
Yeah.
So
You
I'd
weren't
abandoned,
consciously.
no,
Mm,
not at all, not at all. And I'd abandoned that, like that spiritual seeking years ago, because look, I live in an expensive city. Like we have
yes,
bills to pay. We have three
totally.
kids. Like, how am I, like, so if
Mhm.
everything's okay, like we're good. Right. But really,
Yeah.
like deep down inside, I was like so unfulfilled,
Wow.
and the divorce like gave me the opportunity to look at all of that, right? And not that I was
Yes,
unfulfilled in my marriage or my
of
relationship with my
course.
kids. That was the only thing that brought me joy, right? But it was that awareness that like, wow, like obviously, like looking back, you can always connect the dots, and I could identify like where I initially abandoned myself years ago,
Yeah.
which that started the whole process of just depolarization with my relationship with my wife, right? Because, I wasn't living to my fullest potential. I wasn't living to my purpose. I wasn't living with passion, right?
Yeah.
And God, I mean, these are painful discoveries. These are painful discoveries of like, wow, I just like, what have I been doing the past 10 years of my life? How did that
Yeah.
happen? You
I
know?
know. That mirror, when you first realize it, it's how do you not fall into that shame? Like, when did you start catching yourself saying, okay, Tony, it's okay that we got here? And like, when do you make
Oh,
that shift again from that victimhood to
yeah. Yeah.
taking your
Um,
power back?
yeah. I have to say, the timing of, this awareness that I've experienced has been very serendipitous, right? It's almost like I had to read this book and have this session of meditation and do this breath work and then have this dream for this awareness to be like, bing. I'm like, oh, wow, I get that.
Yes.
Right. And then it's like I had to, be on the phone with my mom and then have this conversation with my ex-wife or bing, whoa, that, it was just how
Yeah.
everything came to fruition. Right. I just don't, it couldn't have been designed any other way. It's like,
And how do you
and that's,
not believe in divine timing or
that's,
like a higher power?
yeah. I mean, the beautiful part is, oh, I mean, I definitely believe in a higher power.
Oh, yeah.
But the beautiful part is like, I used to, when I was getting sober, there was this analogy that I loved to use, it was like, because what I was feeling, right, in sobriety, and this came up again in this relationship. And in fact, like going through this was for me personally more difficult than getting sober,
Wow.
because it was layers deeper, right? It was
Yes.
layers deeper.
How's your relationship now with your wife, ex-wife, however you're calling her these days? And
Yeah, so she's still my ex-wife. The divorce isn't final. But we've always maintained a lot of like love through this whole
yeah,
process. I've been supportive of her and her growth, and it took her a long time to build that courage and that strength to ask for the divorce, right? So
yeah,
I'm gonna honor that. And I haven't really been talking to her about the books that I'm reading or the people that I'm working with or the
right.
awarenesses that I have. I just want to show up for her and
Mm,
show it to her, right? So that she can feel that I'm different.
yeah,
And that's kind of what's been happening. And it's been a beautiful process as I start to like have these little awarenesses of like my, shortcomings as a husband. I'm like, okay, so then I take that and I apply it now, right? It's been a beautiful process to kind of witness her, like her heart open up a little bit more, right?
wow, yeah.
Now is it opening up because we're going to be amazing conscious co-parents? I don't know.
Who
Or is it
knows,
opening up
right?
because
Yeah,
she loves me again? I don't know. But what I
yeah,
do know is I'm going to continue to do this work and show up, because it's
yeah,
like developing this more intimate relationship with myself, like allows me to see her, right, in a more intimate way. And the truth is, it's like that, we're all wounded, right? We're all wounded. And it's like, as we
yes,
get into these, conversations, as we get into these arguments, right? And I love to reframe an argument to what it actually is a conversation between two people that love each other that's triggering, right? With these
yeah,
invitations to grow, right? And if you can
mm,
look at an argument or a fight as that, then you're on the way to like healing, right? Because
100%.
that's what we're doing. It's like she's trying to communicate to me her frustrations in the voice of emotion, and I'm trying to communicate to her, out of my logic, right? And that
Mm,
wasn't working, right? So
yeah,
when I was able to like identify, wow, I am reacting from that 8-year-old boy that's saying, love me, don't leave me, don't like accept me, right? When I
hmm,
realized that I was reacting from that place, everything shifted for me, right? And once again, to
yeah,
get to that place, it was just timing, right? Divine timing, where
um,
it was the last argument that we'd had, and she was throwing daggers. I mean, it was like
I believe it.
piercing my
Emotions
armor
were high.
straight into the heart. And after that conversation, I was like, I can't talk to you anymore. Like, I need
Yeah,
space, right? That
hmm,
hurt. That hurt,
yeah,
So in the 2 days that we weren't communicating by phone, just text about the kids, I finally asked myself, like, why do I go to defense? Like, why do I react that way?
So
Right.
powerful.
And that literally was like the portal for me to be like, oh my God. The response was that boy that's like, leave me, love me. Right. And
Yeah.
then I saw her inner child, right. Which was like, look at me, look at me. I need you. Right. And it was just like
Mm-hmm.
this eye-opening experience for me. I was like, oh my God. And then as I'm like talking to my, as I'm talking to my mom about this, and she's a sweet, spiritual, woman. And I'm telling her this, and she's like, well, Tony, you just need to, you need to pray more. And I'm like, Mom, just listen to me. And it was like, ding, the
Ooh.
light bulb went off. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
she's trying to fix me. I just need her to hear me. I don't need her to, give me her opinions or advice. I need to speak, right? And be heard. And I'm like, oh.
Mm.
And then it's like, I look at that and I'm like, I've been doing this for the past 10 years of my relationship. Well, it makes sense why she asked for the divorce, right?
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
and in the process of taking accountability and like making amends to her, I told her, I was like, you'll never have to say you're sorry or ask for forgiveness for forgiveness, because the gift that you've given me was like everything I've ever been looking for. Like as a
Wow.
boy, like this is the expression of love that I've always wanted to give. Right. And this is the expression of love
Right.
that I've always wanted to receive, to have that like beautiful relationship with your wife. Right.
A sacred union,
A
something
sacred
bigger
union,
than ourselves. Yeah. Something that's good for
sacred.
our soul evolution.
Yes. Yes. And it's all because of the divorce, and the
Yeah.
pain. And there's a Sufi poet that I love. His name's Rumi. He has a quote that says, the wound is where the light enters me. Right. And that really summarizes this journey, the
Yeah.
past
That's
8
beautiful.
months. And,
Mm-hmm.
allowing that space for healing,
Like, imagine if she didn't have the courage to ask for that divorce,
Yeah.
because so many women hold on to so much suffering, thinking,
Yeah.
hey, Tony's a great guy. He's a great dad. I shouldn't do this to the kids. I should just stay quiet. I should just
Yeah.
put my needs away.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she had that courage is what opened that portal.
Yeah.
And when you make the difficult choice, the one that you don't know if it's right or wrong, and it could ruin everything, that's where the magic is.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I don't think the goal is to run away from fear. I think it's to see fear.
Mm.
And I think fear is that friend that nobody wants to invite to the party. And all it
Yeah.
wants is to just be accepted. It's just like any other emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a beautiful acronym for fear. It's,
Ooh.
fuck everything and run, or fuck everything and recover,
Ooh, I've never heard that. I love that.
Yeah. And it's, you can go either way,
It's your
and it's,
choice.
yeah,
Exactly. It's a
yeah,
choice.
yeah,
Yeah. Beautiful.
yes. And breaking it all down, like if you really want to get into like, into meditation, you're going to realize like fear is not real, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
created by our ego to protect the ego, right? And your ego's not real either. So if your ego's not real, then fear doesn't exist, but
Yeah.
everything in this moment right now, right? This is
Yeah.
where we're at, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine, you're fine, everything's
And
beautiful.
I think what you have gone through is so magical, because not only are you healing yourself, I would love for you to talk about how you've been able to share your story and help others, and the work that you're doing to help other men also come to this awakening moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I jumped into some men's groups that with men that are going through divorce, and I quickly became like the go-to guy,
The leader.
and
Yeah. The
that's,
leader of the pact.
and that's really, just a testament to just the work I'd done on myself in sobriety,
100%.
where a lot of these guys, unfortunately find it difficult to comprehend the concept of taking accountability, and I'm like, well, if you
Mm,
can't take accountability for your actions, like there's no way like you're going to be able to grow from this,
yeah.
because the truth is like your actions and my actions, whether they were bad or not, gave our partners the only option for the option that they took, which
Yeah.
was to end it.
Exactly.
So if you're
Mhm.
not willing to look at the reasons why they ended it, what are you doing here? And in that process, I started building out, an online course for really everything that I went through. And it's really just this, it's a
Yeah.
journey, right? It's a journey for
Mhm.
men to discover themselves. It's a journey for, men that are going through divorce and men before they're, before they, or as they enter into a relationship, to really understand like who they are. Right. And, there's, for me, it's like what I'm realizing is that the most important thing for me is my embodiment practice. And what I mean by that is like being in my body, right?
Yes.
I mean, men, I think, can navigate unconsciously with unawareness between their ears for years, and they don't even know that they're there, you know?
Women too?
And
Yeah.
that's where I was at, because look, I was running businesses, I was paying bills, I was taking care of the
Yeah.
kids, I was, so that is, I'm in my head, right?
Mhm.
Now, if I can take the time and understand my nervous system, right? Understand my nervous system and understand that where I'm at, am I in my heart? Am I in my body? Am I feeling my
Yeah.
diaphragm? Am I digging my feet into the ground?
Yeah.
Am I feeling the earth, or am I in my head?
Mhm.
That is the foundation for which I was able to start to like understand this process. Because once again, at the beginning of the relationship, like the divorce sent me into like my nervous system just crumbled,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
couldn't, what is this? Why am I feeling like this? Right. And as
Mhm.
I start to like stress my body in a way to understand what its capacity is, okay, like obviously starting with meditation, and then I got into ice baths, and then I got into breath work, and then I got into
Right.
kundalini yoga, and I got into doing these things that would stress my body out so that I knew what its limitations were. Right. So
Yeah.
then when I do that, when I practice that, and then I enter into these conversations with my ex-partner, my
Peers.
ex-wife,
Oh, right. Yeah. Mhm.
and I'm not phased, because one,
Yeah.
I'm in my body, and two, it's like, oh, I understand my wounds now. Like I've done the work to heal those wounds. And once again, it's like in the discovery process of those wounds, it was painful. It was painful when you see
I
that and
know.
you're like, oh
Yeah.
my God, like
Yes.
I'm 44, and I've been living with ideas created
Yeah.
by an eight,
Your
9 year
own
old,
thoughts.
you
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
like I've been reacting from that place of an 8, 9 year old, like how, and
Yeah.
that's the shadow work,
Mhm.
like that's why it's like I couldn't see it, I couldn't hear it, right?
It's in our subconscious programming for
Yeah,
so long, and people
yeah,
think time heals all wounds, and it doesn't at all.
no,
It just
no,
sits deep
yep,
inside of us until that moment where we're forced to face all of our shit, and our
oh
nervous system
gosh,
just, like, blows up, and we're like,
yep,
"Oh, fuck."
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
"Oh, this is a
and
lot."
and and it doesn't mean that I'm perfect by any means, is any stretch of the imagination. It's like I know,
Humans are
like,
not perfect.
yeah,
And I
but
think
what
that's
I
like the greatest gift is this like awareness. And yet now you have the tools and resources of the embodiment. So if you do in the future have an issue, you're able to pick it up so much faster. And it's not going into your subconscious and you're not pushing it away because now you are radically aware of the work that you need to do so it doesn't fester. Because now you know that when it does fester, it leads to massive moments that we don't want.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In relationships, they're so beautiful, right? If you can step back and look at it from a wide lens, right? If you can step back and look at your relationship with a wide lens, you'll see that I can see that I was communicating from a wounded place, right? So
Yeah.
it's almost like come closer, right? But here,
But you're also like
come
pushing.
come closer, but here, and that's the cycle of our patterns, right?
Yeah.
That's how
Wow.
we communicate,
Mm.
from a place of like unconsciousness or unawareness of that shadow component, and it's like now it's like, okay, like I understand sacred union, right? I understand sacred leadership. And another thing, that been brought to my awareness is just, you said something about curiosity earlier, right? And it's like, I mean, I remember when I first entered into the relationship with my ex-wife, it's like when I first saw her, I knew, oh my God, that's her, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it was
Same with my husband too. It was
that
like
was,
instant.
it just
Yeah.
boom, this beautiful attraction, right? So magnetic.
Hmm.
And then as you're courting and you're dating, it's like you're curious, like, where are you from?
Yeah.
How tall are you?
Hmm.
What kind of car do you drive? Where do you work? How do you like your coffee? Right? You're curious, right? And what I realized in my relationship with her is that I had stopped being curious, right? I had stopped being curious, but more importantly, in
Yeah.
the moment, right? In the moment with her,
Yeah.
right? And now it's like I've re-engaged that curiosity in the moment with her of being able to like identify, like, oh, you're feeling this, like, tell me more about that. Like, why are you
Yeah.
feeling that? As opposed to not being curious, and
Which is so many people. I think that that's the greatest reason we have so many divorce rates and so many marriages that are unhappy is because we stop being curious about our partners and we stop going to the depths of our emotions with our partners because it gets harder. And I always say the most difficult conversations lead to deeper intimacy.
oh yeah,
And
yeah,
when we get courageous and vulnerable, that's where the magic is.
yeah. It's a
But it's
portal.
hard.
And how do you set the container for that?
Creating that emotional safe space takes a lot of practice. And there's going to be moments where you think you're doing it right. And then it's like trial and error. And there's moments where, because my husband and I were able to do this work while remaining married and
Yeah.
like committed. And every other day, I'm like revealing more and more of my wounds. And he is just like trying his
Wow.
hardest to
Yeah.
hold space
Wow.
and having to discernment I think is the most important thing, and boundaries,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And like if I
Mm,
start
yeah.
taking my anger out on him, he is so amazing at holding that boundary and saying, babe, you're about to hurt me, do you want to go process this real quick?
Yeah.
Or when I feel like he's not hearing me, I'm like, hey babe, I really need to feel heard right now. I don't need a solution, I need you to hear me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like it takes time, it takes practice.
To
It
develop
and
that
like you
skill.
said,
Yeah.
yeah. And now like we're not perfect, but now it's like we go months and months of it being blissful and amazing before something else comes up. So
Yeah.
it's really nice to
And it's
have
and
like
it
those
and it's
moments.
those moments when they do come up, gosh, are they not just like beautiful and powerful and, like you said, magical, right?
Yeah, because we
It
have the
just hmm
tools now and we
and
know.
it balances it out. And
Hmm.
you talked about discernment, and it really brought up for me the idea between the ability to discern between what you want and what you need in life, right?
Yes.
Now, what I've realized is like when I go for what I want, there's pain attached to it, but when I
Hmm.
go for what I need, personal growth, there's only growth attached to it. And how I can like relay that into going through the divorce, like the first thing, the first place I went was neediness, like, well, I want you back, right? I want you to
Yeah.
see like and, and God, and all that did was like bring me more pain, more suffering, more
Mm.
grieving, right? Because she wasn't receiving that. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like, stop, Tony, stop. Like, what do I need? I need to grow from this. I need to grow, right? I need to understand where I went wrong.
Yeah,
And,
that's
and
powerful.
that's where the
That
growth
shift.
came.
That's amazing. It reminds me of how when we want more materially, like materialistic things like money, cars, things, power, and we want it because we want it to impress others, or we want things to validate a void within us, you're never going to find fulfillment in those
Yeah,
things.
not at all.
But when you do the things that you need to do to fulfill yourself and then you get those things, it's such a different experience. And it's so similar with our relationships too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
when you get into a relationship to fill a void, it's never going to be fulfilling. But when you fulfill yourself
Hmm.
and then you find a partner who complements that, when you find a home versus just a house because it's pretty on Instagram,
Yeah.
like it's such a different thing. You can have the same thing. It's literally, it's not about what the item is or the person is. It's about, is it coming from a place of want or is it coming from
Yeah.
a place of need?
Yeah. And that's, kind of rings true with where I'm at in my process. It's like I want to develop an intimate relationship with myself before I can go develop an intimate relationship with anybody else, and
Yeah.
that even includes like my ex-wife. I've never in my life taken this time for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my story is like I'd abandoned myself when I was an 8, 9-year-old to be the protector of our family, and then I bolt from Oklahoma to LA to pursue acting and drugs and alcohol. And then, I get sober and
Wow.
then, abandon myself again from the arts of where I loved my life. Like in
Yeah.
early sobriety, like the lights just came on, right? I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a bad guy, and I start to put my life together very quickly. And then the family came and I bought a restaurant, and I'm
Yeah.
like, it's the last thing
You were
I wanted
literally
to
like
do,
going, going, going,
you know,
going. There was no
but
moment to
yeah. And,
break.
and, and in that, it's like, I had abandoned myself again, right? It was to provide for my family, which is a noble thing to do. Right. And,
But it was a death to
you
the
know,
creative side of you.
yeah, yeah, that's my MO, right? Abandoning myself. So it's like here, I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I'm going to stand firm. I'm going to look at this, I'm going to stay in
Mm-hmm.
integrity, and I'm going
Yeah.
to continue to show up for my family, for my kids. Yeah. Take like a break. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Take a break from like,
100%. Yeah. And I think that's the scariest thing for a lot of people that I talk to is what do you do in that break, that in between? Like how we're so conditioned by society and capitalism and the way that we always have to be working hard for money. We always have to be
yeah,
working towards something. So when you say the word break, it can send so many people's nervous system into this uncomfortable space of what do you mean?
yeah,
Like, what do I do? If
yeah,
we don't have a to-do list, what do we do? If we
yeah,
don't know exactly what we're doing when we wake up, what do we do?
yeah.
And
And
how do you
that's,
navigate that empty space?
well, I mean, when I say break, I mean, I'm still, building this online course. I'm still being of
Right.
service to men,
Yes.
right? I'm still, actively participating, in my sober community. I'm still, being a parent to my kids. I'm still showing up for my ex, right? For me, it was like decompressing and taking a break from like the business that I'd created, right? And I'm
Hmm.
selling them. I built this restaurant brand of 5 restaurants, and
In
it was a
LA,
lot.
nonetheless, which is
Yeah, it was
insane.
a lot. It was
Yeah.
brutal, it took everything out of me, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that's what I needed to take a break from, and take a break from.
It's like a
I
recalibration of your time and energy.
Yeah, 100%, and I I want to say like all of this has been, brought to my attention only because like the wounds that were exposed, right? The wounds that were exposed, and I feel that like some of our wounds can only be revealed in relationships, because it's
100%.
really within the mirror of that love that we experience with each other where they show themselves,
Yes.
because like my wounds don't come out in the real world, like when I'm working, it's like I'm a pretty happy go lucky person,
Or even
firm,
our
strong.
friends who know us so deeply can't pull out the wounds out of us the way
No,
a
no,
intimate
no.
relationship can.
Yes. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
because there's so much at stake, right? There's so much at stake. That was one of the things that I didn't get. For me, it's like no elder taught me how to go deep. There was no rites of passage for me. There was no
Yeah.
like, older men's group that were saying, Tony, like this is how you are supposed to be in a relationship, and that to me is like
Hmm.
one of the fundamental problems with men in our society now. It's like who we were told to go provide,
Yeah.
and to create safety, physical safety, not emotional or
Hmm.
psychological safety, physical safety. If you're
Yeah.
protecting your kids and your family and your wife and you're providing, you're good.
Hmm.
Okay, that's what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I was also asking like other men, like, hey, like what's the relationship with your wife? Like how many times are you having sex a month?
Yeah.
Once if I'm lucky. I'm like, okay,
Wow.
well, I'm doing better than that, so I must be doing better than you,
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
my
That's
gauge.
our
That
measure
that
of
was my
our metric. Yeah.
yeah, or that was how I gauged success in my relationship. Okay, cool. Well, it sounds like I'm doing better than you, so we must be okay, right? And on the feminine side, it's like I feel most women are like and they're masculine and they need help finding
Yes.
that healthy masculine man to like pull them into their feminine, right? So that
Mhm.
glow can come back, that light can come back on, so they can just be like, ah,
And
right? Because
not
that,
constantly be on edge. And
yeah,
I know when I was stuck in my masculine energy, if I felt anything not going the way I wanted to, I would snap. And I would be nagging my husband, and like over the littlest things, he didn't put a trash bag in the trash can after taking the trash out. And I'm just like fury. And
yeah,
it's because we have never been able to just relax and feel safe in our body because the patriarchy, the capitalist society that we're
hmm,
in, just like, I mean, I've been raped before. I've had, a lot of sexual assault in my life. So I've just felt like I'm not safe in this world. I'm not safe on this planet. I have to protect myself because no
yeah,
one's ever protected me.
yeah,
I don't have a strong masculine figure in my life who I could have relied on. So I had to do that for myself. But when I met my husband and he offered, I got triggered. I was like, no, I
yeah,
can take care of myself. I don't
yeah,
need your help.
yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah,
he backed off because he wants to respect me. He
hmm,
wants to respect my
hmm,
boundaries. He doesn't know, right? He doesn't have a tool book or any
yeah,
guidebook that tells him that when a woman is acting like that, it's because she's never been able to step into her feminine energy.
yeah,
And you just
yeah,
have to stand firm and tall and say, babe, I know you're not used to this, but I'm your husband now and I got this.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
all we want to hear. It's
yeah,
just so hard for us to believe that we are worthy of
mm,
that.
yeah. And I felt that in my heart.
Yeah.
That's so true. And I feel that that's probably the dynamic in a lot of households right now, and that inability to really feel into that and to understand that
Mhm.
and to see that. Like, I didn't see that in my relationship. I can
Same.
now. I can
Mhm.
now. And that's the hard part. It's like, I, man, I pray. It breaks my heart that like I, I want to give this version of me to my wife 10 years ago, obviously. And
But I think it's so much more special when you are able to change and come back into union or even just like evolve as a human being and see the growth that you've
yeah,
had. I
yeah,
don't know. For me, that's like really fulfilling.
yeah.
I don't know about you.
No, no, no. It's completely fulfilling, and it's, the heartache that I feel is no longer there. It gets more full of gratitude,
Yeah.
and acceptance and just,
A lot of
a lot
acceptance.
of acceptance and a lot of gratitude. It's like, because wow, like, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Obviously I was supposed to go through that because I went through that. Obviously she was supposed to go through that because she's going through that.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm open to finding out what the meaning is of it. It's like, and as I'm open, like, hey, here's a lot of men that I see need help. I'm going to go help them, and,
Exactly.
and that is like, that's my purpose now.
Calling.
That's my passion now. It's like as I talk to these men and I'm like, ding, the light comes on. I'm like, yeah, there it
Mhm.
is. There it
Yeah.
is. Right. And it's a beautiful process, and it's painful, as
And if like 10 years ago you were the Tony you are now and you weren't able to go on this journey, you wouldn't be able to help others the way you are now.
Yeah.
And, who knows what that journey would have looked like. I'm sure you would have had a fun, fulfilling life,
Yeah.
not having all this trauma and like all this shit. What a purpose though. Like
Yeah.
what a impact that you have the opportunity to like create such a huge wave in
Yeah.
society and
Yeah.
create change
And
and a legacy.
the beautiful thing is that I started that TikTok account as it's private. Like, you can't, it's not connected to my real name. So,
Wow. Interesting.
and I started it back in like March or April, really just as like documenting the growth, documenting the pain, documenting as an outlet for me. Right. And then it just took fire.
How has
Right.
the feeling been putting that out there? From the beginning, I'm sure you were scared,
I mean,
vulnerable.
no, I mean, it felt really as I wanted to do it as a way to like look back and be like, oh, wow, like I remember when I had that awareness. Oh, I remember when the light bulb came on there. Oh, I remember when I
Yeah.
felt that. Right. So it's almost like an online journal for me. Right.
Mm,
And that I
so
wasn't
cool.
expecting anybody to ever see. I
Yeah.
was just doing it for me, right? So that I could go back and look and like, oh yeah, I remember feeling that pain. And
Mhm.
and I tell you, like, in my morning ritual, which I have a very strict morning ritual full of like prayer and meditation and affirmations. And in my divorce, before, I had never once said, I love you, Tony. Self-worth and self-love was something that I struggled with, right?
Yeah.
So maybe about 3 months ago, 3 months ago, I started to say in the morning, I love you, Tony. You're a good guy. You deserve good things, you
Wow.
know?
Yeah.
And as I'm practicing this in the morning and I move into, meditation and prayer, one morning I saw that 8-year-old boy and I was like, oh God, I love you, man. I got you. I got
Wow.
you, right? Today, you don't have to have fear of
Chills.
abandonment. Today, you don't have to have, to feel that control, to have safety. You don't have to do any of these things, right? Go and
Wow.
play, go outside, go run and play baseball today. Go create that life that you always wanted. And by the
I got
way,
chills.
thank you. Thank you so much, because the character defects or the survival skills that you had created, that hyper awareness,
Yeah.
right, is what's made me successful today. So thank you so fucking much.
Wow.
Go play, right? And I do this every morning, and the feeling that I get is just this beautiful release, right? Most recently, I went to that version of me before the divorce, right? I went to the version of me before the divorce, and that guy, he was a fucking great dude. He showed up the best that he knew how. And it's like I told him, I'm like, I love you, man. Like, you fucking crushed it for the family. You did everything you thought you were supposed to do. I got you now. And I'm sorry that it took me so long to show up.
Oh my gosh.
And that
Chills.
that allowed me the process to like forgive myself, right? To
Mm-hmm.
forgive myself,
Yeah.
and it allowed me the process to detach from that old version of me. And
Mm-hmm.
and it allowed me to see growth.
I
And I
think
do
that
that.
you literally stepped into your higher self.
Yeah. I every night
You're,
before I go to bed, it's like that's what I pray and I meditate and I think about, like, okay, who do I want to be in 5 years?
yeah.
What does it look like? What does it feel like? What do I smell like? What am I wearing? And I connect with that, you know?
Where did you learn how to do that? Or was it just like inner wisdom that just came
Yeah.
out when it needed to come out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's magical.
Yeah.
And this is why I always say, like, everyone is capable of that, but not everyone has access to that inner wisdom the way you've been able to access that. And that's why your course is so important and it needs to be birthed out into the world. And it needs to have that framework for people who don't have such a strong intuition, don't have that strong connection to their body.
Feel that we're all like that's obviously the feminine energies aspect, right? Intuition and feeling. And I feel that we all have a very strong intuitive mind, intuitive body, right?
Yeah.
It's just tapping into that, right?
Hmm. I'm curious to see what the world at large is going to look like in like 40 years.
Mm.
Like, I feel like, I mean, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius during this time, which is a huge, like, Pluto is the planet of change. Aquarius is the planet of like systems and processes and all of the things of strategies, like the way things are happening right now. And it's like, I think it's going to be really magical. And I'm really excited that we're here in this moment in time. And it's so hard to be here because the energy is so dense, but it's such a magical time too, because we're creating the foundation of something magical that can really be birthed into new
Yeah,
earth.
no, I completely agree. It's like, you ask, like, what is it going to be like in 40 years? And I look at my kids, and it's like, how am I showing up today for them
Yeah.
so that they can show up for themselves? And
Mm-hmm.
and this whole process is allowed me to be a more present father. Not that I was a bad dad before,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's, once again, it's like, oh wow, like I can show up for them in this way, and
Yeah.
it's been an eye-opening experience for me. And that just kind of, it tees it up for what is the next 40 years going to be like, and it's
It's
like,
exciting
do you
times.
have kids as well, or?
I do not have kids.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want kids. It
Yeah.
sounds like a huge responsibility.
it's pretty
I
it's pretty
am
hard. It's pretty
terrified.
hard. Yeah, talk about
I'm
teachers
like,
that,
exactly. I'm so upset we didn't get into conscious parenting, but maybe another
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that they mirror a lot of the things that you wish you had
Oh,
or you
oh
didn't
yeah.
have or you want
Oh
to
yeah.
do or you
Yeah.
don't. And then learning how to balance like your inner child versus like them, like detaching that and
Yeah.
be like, this isn't my opportunity to reparent myself. This is like a
Yeah.
whole new human being with their own
Yeah. Yeah.
life.
And another, I have a 7-year-old boy, and another thing that I love to do is like feel into that 8-year-old boy of myself and play with my 7-year-old.
Oh
And
my God,
that's,
I love
yeah.
that.
And that's what I love to just like
He probably
imagine that, you know?
appreciates that so
Yeah.
much.
I love to just imagine that. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
So you said your mom was spiritual,
Yeah.
and was she able to help you through this journey at all, or is she like where is she at?
As a kid, and I'll give you some context around this. I grew up in Oklahoma. Saturday nights I was going to Catholic church. Sunday morning I was going to the Baptist church. I was an altar
Wow.
boy, you know, but I was so confused and conflicted about religion,
Yeah.
and I went on a self-seeking journey myself at like 16. I went to like Latter-day Saints. I went to Assembly of God. I went to everything that I could possibly find, non-denom, you know, back to Presbyterian, back to Catholic, you know, just because
Wow.
there was something out there that I needed to find and I wasn't finding it. I'd kind of given up. And that's what led me into like drugs and alcohol and then getting sober. And then within the confines of sobriety, it's like I was able to develop that relationship with my conception of God, right? Not the God
Yeah.
that everybody was telling me to believe in, but my God, which is a loving, forgiving
Yeah.
God. I needed forgiveness, right? Because like they're telling me
Yeah.
like, if you do this, you're going to hell. I'm like, well, at 16, I'm going to hell. So I might as
Yeah.
well go fucking party, right? You know?
So
So
true.
that's where I went, right? You know, and my
Yeah.
mom, a very like firm Catholic, prays the rosary every day. When I get into sobriety, within there, she became this like samurai, right? Like this
Wow.
amazing, you know, spiritual samurai. And so
Amazing.
yeah, she was able to help me through the process and guide me. And really just be like, listen, she just listened to me, you know, except
That's
for
incredible.
that one moment where she tried to fix me, where
Yeah.
literally the light bulb just came on, you know. So I'm grateful
Mhm.
for that, because I was like, oh, that's what my ex-wife must have felt like, and that
Yeah.
sucked, you know.
It does suck
So
not feeling
yeah.
heard by your partner.
Yeah.
I always tell my husband, I'm like, I don't need a solution. I just need you to listen to me.
Yeah, I mean,
But like
and that's,
men want to save, you want to
yes,
protect,
of
you want to,
course. I
yeah.
mean, look, you know, it goes like, it goes both ways, right? It's like in my relationship, it's like, yeah, I wanted her to feel loved. I wanted her to feel at ease, right? So that's where I'm
Hmm.
coming from, you know.
Totally
And
valid.
unbeknownst to me, like that's the wrong way to approach it, you know. And the beautiful thing now is like I can hear what she's saying, you know. I can
Yeah.
hear that
But
I'm
I think it's
connecting with her
because you're
emotions, you know.
awakened.
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge difference between like an awakened human being is able to connect beyond the surface
Mm,
level and
yeah.
hear beyond the surface and get curious before responding. And I think that's the journey that we're all on. It's just like awakening to beneath the veil of
Yes.
what
Yeah.
we've
And
been seeing,
and
getting
it's
deeper.
literally it's just like 2 layers deeper, right?
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
where our feminine partners are asking their men to go, just a couple, but it's like
Hmm.
we can't see it.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to wrap my head around why it took me so long and why it took this for me to like bing.
But then you're
It's,
able to have that compassion for others that you said
yeah,
aren't able to
of
see it.
course.
And
Of
you're like,
course. You know, and it's like, it's funny. It's like I'll talk to my men, you know, my men's groups, and I'm like, you know, like, hey, like, what's your relationship with your wife? And like, oh, you know, she's screaming at me out of this, and like, she's crazy. I'm like, well, why don't you try this, right?
yeah,
And they did, and they're like, oh my God, that worked.
it worked.
You
It's like
know?
10 years of
And
fighting solved in one
yeah,
tiny
yeah,
change.
yeah. And one of my really good friends, who, he was one of the first guys that I'd called when the divorce started to happen. So he's witnessed all this, right? He's like heard me throughout, like, hey man, like I read The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. It blew my heart open. Like you know, the light's starting to come on, and
Yeah.
hey, I joined these like men's groups, and as I'm telling him like what I'm learning and how I'm communicating with my ex, he was like, he calls me up one day, he's like, hey, like, you know, my wife just said this, like, how do I respond? And I'm like, oh, well, you're in your feminine, she's in her masculine. So you
Yeah.
need to switch the scale. So this is how you do that. And he does it. And he's like, oh my God, that worked. Right. Calls me the next week. He's
Magic.
like, hey, she's saying this. Like, how do I respond? I'm like, oh, this is what you need to do. You need to,
Yeah.
come to her and say this. It goes from that to like, hey, we're having like the best sex of our lives because
How do we
she
connect to God
feels,
through
she
our
feels,
sexual experience?
yeah, she feels like that's all she needed was to feel seen and heard and validated,
Wow.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
Tony, thank you so much. Your service for humanity, for yourself is magical and it is so, so needed. I am grateful to have you in my orbit and on
Yeah.
my podcast.
Same.
Please let my audience know how they can work with you if they're interested or if they have their partners that want to contact you.
Yeah. So I have a website up. It's called theawakenedmindset.com. I can also be found on YouTube Shorts and on TikTok, The Awakened Mindset. Yeah, I'm building out a couple of pretty intensive courses in the space for men and just embodiment
Amazing.
practice and yeah, understanding like how to show up for our feminine partners in the way that they've been yearning for us to show up and
I
help
love it.
help them see the light.
Music to my ears. Well, thank you again so much. And I
Thank
hope
you,
you
Sunny.
have
Yeah.
a great day.